Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. Today I am going to be doing a state of the collection video. But before I jump into showing you these watches that are in my collection, I just wanted to tell you about my collection prior to starting this YouTube channel and the rules that I applied to myself that I think worked quite well as a collector of watches. So prior to starting this channel, I had a 7-watch collection, and that was a really comfortable size for me. And what that consisted of was 5 watches that were my core watches in my core collection that would never ever change. And those watches are still in my collection today. I then had a G-Shock, which is technically part of my collection, but it never sat in my watch box. So it never really felt like part of my collection. It was always just the watch that I wore at work. A watch that I didn't overly love. It wasn't the best G-Shock on the market, but it certainly did its job. And I guess it is still part of my collection, which is why it sort of added into this 7 watches. I then always had a spot in my collection that I called my rotating watch. This was a watch that I would buy and sell as fast or as slow as I wanted to. And having this watch in my collection allowed me to sort of buy and sell watches and enjoy different watches that I wanted to own without allowing my watch collection to get bigger and bigger by buying more and more watches. So this rotating watch would sometimes be in my collection for maybe 3 months. And then perhaps by the end of that 3-month period, I'd had my time with this watch. I felt that I didn't need to own it anymore. I would then sell it and buy another one. Sometimes the watch that was in this position would sit there for 2 years if I was still loving it and still enjoying it. But it would stay in the collection for as long as I was still enjoying it, as long as I was still loving it, as long as I was still wearing it. But what it did was it allowed me to have that sort of watch collecting experience without sort of blowing my budget and without exploding the size of my watch collection. So now I've started this channel, and that obviously changed my watch collecting habits somewhat. However, I still have applied those same rules. I want to have my core collection, my work watch, and then have some rotating watches. But rather than have one rotating watch, I've sort of pushed that out to maybe 5 rotating watches. So that I've got more watches coming in and out of my collection, allowing me to make content for this channel, but also giving me some more experiences with a much wider range of watches. The only problem I've had with this is over the last year or so, I've bought a few watches which just haven't been able to leave those rotating spots, and they've moved from the rotating spots into my core collection. So those 5 positions that were in my core collections is now 11 positions. So it has actually exploded a little bit. But I haven't allowed it to get too big. There are certainly watches that I have sold that I love, but I've allowed them to leave the collection so that I can rotate them through to other watches. Another change I've made is I've changed my work watch to a rotating watch. But I've sort of kept it in that same sort of theme. A watch that I can wear at work, a watch that is either a G-Shock or something that I can bash around a little bit and not be too concerned about. So it's really given me an opportunity to have a watch that is a little bit different from my other watches in my collection. And I've allowed that to rotate through as well. So why am I making a state of collection video today? Well, I've just sold off all of my rotating watches. And there are some watches in that sort of rotating positions that I really enjoyed. They were beautiful, beautiful watches. However, it had now come to the time where I was now not really wearing them as much. Even though I still loved them, I've allowed them to leave the collection and now put some money back into my bank and allow that sort of money to be available now to buy some more watches. So I've really culled the collection down to the bare minimum that I'm comfortable with, and they are the watches that I'm going to be showing you today. They are now my core collection of watches, and I really want to share with you guys my core collection of watches because it'd be very easy to show you a stated collection of lots of other watches that I've got in that for temporary amounts of time that are for my rotating positions that are for this channel. However, that's not really what I think of as my collection. So now that I have got this collection back to my core collection, the smallest collection that I am comfortable with, I think it is a really good time to do a state of collection. Now guys, just before I flip the camera around now, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I'd really appreciate it if you just click on that little subscribe button. But let's flip the camera around now and let me show you the watches that I've actually allowed to stay in my full-time core collection. Let's check them out. So just quickly, before I show you all the watches that are in my core collection, I thought I might just share with you how I store my watches. I have these 2 watch boxes that I have made myself. This one I made recently. I've made a video about that. If you're interested to see how that is made, check out my back catalogue. But they sit on my counter here, just next to my bed. This one here was the watch box I made first. Inside here I have 5 positions for watches, as well as a little flat section there for another watch. And down here I have a drawer which I keep all my bits and pieces, my wallet, my sunglasses, etc. This one here was really more for my sort of overflow because I'd now collected more watches and I needed another spot for it. So inside here, I've got more sections for other watches. Obviously they're empty. I didn't want to give you any spoilers for the watches that are coming up shortly. All right, so let's check out the watches that are normally filling this watch box here completely and partially filling this watch box here. So the first watch in my stated collection is my Longines Hydro Conquest, and this is an amazing watch. I still think of it as the best quality, best affordable luxury brand watch. It is just so well made and so well put together and fits so well on my wrist that I absolutely love it. And this watch has a little bit of a special place for me because it was the watch that I got for my 40th birthday. My friends and my family all pitched in towards it, and it was a watch that I put a huge amount of time into picking because I knew it was going to be a little bit more expensive, being the most expensive watch in my collection. And it is a watch that sort of put me on the pathway to making my own channel because I put a lot of time into watching reviews about watches on YouTube, and I went from watching an occasional review about a watch that I particularly liked through to actually watching these channels as a form of entertainment. So it actually sort of put me on that pathway to making this channel. So my first watch in my collection. The next is a watch that my dad gave me a few years ago. He bought this back in 1985 and he wore it for quite a few years. And I remember him wearing this watch. He ended up using it as a dive watch, which obviously it is not a dive watch. So at some point during that time when he was wearing it, he ended up killing it. He then put it in a box. And for years, I remember it sitting in this box. And a few years ago, I asked if I could have it. He gave it to me and I had it fully restored. And I put it on this Uncle Seiko bracelet, which I think suits quite well. And it's designed specifically for the pogue here. It's not a watch I wear a lot, but it's a watch that I really do appreciate wearing when I do. And it is nice now that it is fully restored, that it works properly, and I can wear it whenever I feel like it. The next watch is actually my first automatic watch that I was given. My father gave this to me when I was about 14 years old. It's nothing too special, it's just a black dial dive watch. I used it specifically for diving. It's an ADEC, which I think is made by Citizen. It's a slightly smaller, sort of 40mm size, but it's just such a cool watch, and I'm so glad that I was able to keep it, and I chose to keep it. It's just nice to have this sort of first automatic dive watch that I had in my collection. And you can see it really did get banged and crashed around. Bezel was worn out, there's scratches all over this mineral crystal here. I wore this for probably 10 years, day and night, before I then moved on to other watches. Next is my Seiko Samurai Save the Ocean Great White Shark Edition. This is one of my favorite Seiko watches of all time. In fact, I'd probably call it my favorite Seiko of all time, mostly because I absolutely love the dial on this. It's probably the nicest dial on a watch that I've ever had before. I love the bezel, I love the bezel action, and I love this watch so much that I end up spending a bit of money and put it on a strap code bracelet, which wasn't particularly cheap, but it's just such a nice watch to wear. And I bought it specifically to be sort of an everyday watch, a watch that I could wear just daily. It's just my daily wearing watch, and a watch that I was quite comfortable to take with me when I go traveling. I don't particularly want to wear either of these watches or take these around the world when I do travel. This is sort of the right sort of size, right sort of feeling, right sort of quality, and the right sort of price range for a watch that I sort of want to wear every day, and I'm comfortable taking with me when I go traveling. Next is my favorite Vostok of all time, and I was very lucky to get this one. It is a little bit hard to find sometimes. I found it on the second-hand market, but it was basically in new condition. It is the Batman Scuba Dude GMT. Now, I have put it on one of my favorite bracelets of all time. This is those cheaper AliExpress sort of engineered style bracelets, and I think it suits this watch quite well. I don't think it fits perfectly on the lugs there, but I quite like the feel of it and the look of it on wrist. It is such a cool watch, this one. I just really enjoy it. I love that sunburst dial that it has, the look of the hands, and it's just a little bit funky. It's very interesting, and I'm so happy to have this one in my collection. Next, we have another Seiko, and I do have a few Seikos in my collection, and it is a little bit Seiko heavy, my collection. This is a watch that I was not expecting to join my collection. It was a watch that I was sort of expecting just to rotate through. However, this is the Seiko Sumo, and is one of my favorite Seikos that I've ever come across. I think it is so well made, so well built. I think for the money, I think it is actually the best Seiko you can buy for yourself. Yes, okay, I absolutely love this Seiko. I love the dial of the Seiko. It's probably one of my favorite Seikos of all time. But I do have to say, I think this is a better Seiko than the Samurai. It has the better movement in there, it has sapphire crystal, it has just a beautiful case, and it's put together so well. Saying that, I can't sort of differentiate between which one I like better. I know I like the dial on the Samurai better. I love that blue Save the Ocean dial. But this is such an amazing watch, and it is a watch that I wear a lot. Next, we have one of only 2 watches from AliExpress watches that I've actually kept. And this is the Tactical Frog Captain Willard Homage done by Heimdallr, I believe. It is such a quality put together watch, and it is such a good looking watch and such a nice watch to have on wrist. I put it on this sort of leather strap that I had from another watch. I didn't particularly like the rubber band that it came with, and you can buy a bracelet that fits this, but the quality of it isn't quite as good as I would want, and I know I'd be a little bit disappointed if I got that bracelet. I wouldn't really enjoy wearing it, but I actually quite enjoy wearing it on this nice sort of leather strap. It is just so well made. I'm super impressed by it. It's such a beautiful watch, and I think it's one of the most affordable, best watches on AliExpress. And we're back to Seiko again. It's the SKX 009. Now this is a watch that I wasn't expecting to join my collection permanently. It is a watch that I bought because I thought everybody needs to experience an SKX at some point in their sort of watch collecting career. And I really wanted to get a hold of one. This one's in absolutely fantastic condition. It also came with a strap code bracelet, which really sort of makes the watch even better. But as soon as I got it, I just thought, wow, this is stunning. I understand why people love this watch so much. And my wife even said to me when she saw it, wow, you've got to keep that one. And it's the first time she's ever said that about any of the watches that I've bought. So for her to pick it out and say, yeah, that one's particularly special, you should keep it, I have to say I do agree with her. So it's definitely going to be in my collection forever, or at very least a very long term. Now back to AliExpress for my last AliExpress watch. Yes, I've only kept 2, even though I've had some amazing ones in the collection, and it's my super affordable little BERNY. This watch is only 50 Australian dollars, but it wears so well, it looks so good, the movement's actually really good, it actually holds really good time, this one. And it's a watch that I sort of keep coming back to, that I actually quite enjoy wearing. I've got it on this fairly sort of cheap sort of leather strap that came from AliExpress as well. It's not the best strap in the world. I wouldn't mind getting something a little bit better for it, but it's still very comfortable, and I think it does suit the aesthetics of the watch. It still blows me away of how much you get from a watch like this for the price that they charge for it. Then we have my Junkers Bauhaus. This watch has blown me away. I absolutely love this watch. I was on a bit of a mission a few years ago when I had seen the Young Hands Max Bill watch that I knew I wanted this Bauhaus style watch. And I bought a couple of different watches that are much more affordable, that sort of had that sort of look and feel to it. However, it just wasn't quite good enough. And I knew I didn't really want to spend the huge amount of money to me on that Max Bill. So when I saw this one come up on the used market for a price that I could afford, I just jumped on it. And I think it's a gorgeous looking dial. And I actually found, and in the time that I've had it, that I now actually prefer the look of this one over the Young Hands. It has a good Swiss movement inside of it as well. Lovely display case back. I've been wearing it on the engineered style bracelet. I'm not sure if this fits it perfectly. I think it feels nice on wrist because it gives it a bit of extra weight, but I think perhaps I might sort of do a bit of a chop and change with the straps, maybe try a couple of other things on it. And I have my pocket watch. This watch is absolutely amazing. I love this thing, and I have a great story that relates to it as well. A few years ago, my wife and I did a trip around the UK. It was a nice long trip. We saw a lot of the back countries and the countryside, and I sort of thought, since being on this big trip, I'd really like to buy myself a souvenir whilst I was in the UK, and what better to buy than a watch? I'd always wanted a pocket watch in my collection, and I thought it'd be a nice story to have, to buy a pocket watch whilst on a trip like that. And I ended up finding this in this tiny little markets that was just near the birthplace of William Shakespeare on Stratford-on-Avon. It was a little marketplace, lots of little bits and pieces, groceries and little bits and pieces, as markets are. And this old fella, he had all these little tiny trinkets, and there was a little basket full of pocket watches. And this one just stood out to me. I really wanted a slightly older one, something which had a key option. I didn't really want the wind on the top here. Didn't pay very much for it, but because I loved it so much, I actually ended up getting it fully restored, which is why there's another key. One of the pillars inside here had died. I ended up probably spending a bit too much having it restored, because realistically I probably don't use this very much. However, it is really nice to have it working perfectly. And this thing, it really is great, and it really does work perfectly when fully wound. And the last watch has taken the place in the rotation of my work watches. I had a G-Shock there, I bought another G-Shock, I tried a couple of homages to G-Shocks and full metal G-Shocks. I then had the Casio Databank, and then this is the current one that is in that sort of rotation of work watches. It's probably my favorite so far that I've managed to buy in this sort of rotation of work watches. So there's my collection as of today. I don't see myself really selling any of these watches. The Casio may end up being flipped for something else at some point. There's a small chance that the Tactical Frog may get sold in the more distant future. The SKX, I don't see myself selling it, but there's always a small potential of it. But the rest, I think, are permanent features in my collection. Now, you may notice if you've been watching my channel that there's a few key watches that are missing. As I've mentioned, I have been flipping a few. I have kept them for as long as I've really wanted them, as long as I've really enjoyed them in my collection, but I've let them go just to sort of bring the collection down to a much more manageable size and also put some more money back in my bank account so that I can start buying some more watches, enjoying more watches, wearing more watches, and have more watches available to review on this channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed having a look at my collection, but I do hope to see you in the next video.